Welcome back. This is session number 4 of the 2018 Virtual Genealogy Fair. It is for those who have an experienced skill level, and the event is entitled How to Search for Photographs that Document Civilian Conservation Corps, CCC, Camps and Activities. Our speakers are Kaitlyn, Crain, Enrique, and Kelsey, Noel. During their session, they will teach you how to navigate records held at the National Archives Still Picture Unit that document CCC camps and activities. Our presenters both work in the Still Pictures branch located at the National Archives in College Park, Maryland. Ms. Enrique is an archive specialist, and Ms. Noel is a processing archivist. I'm turning the stage over to Kaitlyn, Crain, Enrique, and Kelsey, Noel. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Kaitlyn Crain Enriquez, and I'm an archive specialist. Today I'll be covering the first half of our presentation, and Kelsey will be covering the second half of our presentation. Today, Kelsey and I have really 4 goals for our presentation. The first goal we want to do is cover series within Record Group 35, or the main series within Record Group 35. And Record Group 35 is records of the Civilian Conservation Corps. Secondly, we want to highlight series outside of Record Group 35 that contain CCC photographs that document camps and activities. The CCC worked with many different federal agencies as well as state agencies, and because of that fact, you find CCC-related imagery in record groups outside of Record Group 35. The third goal, by the end of this presentation, we want researchers to have a list of information that they should have prior to beginning their research. This skill level is marked as experienced because you do need to have information prior to beginning your research. There are a lot of different arrangements and a lot of different search methods, and so it's really important to have your facts before you start your research in the still picture branch. And through the course of this presentation, we also want to set expectations in terms of what types of CCC imagery we have in still pictures, as well as what you will not find in still pictures. So here's a snapshot of the Civilian Conservation Corps within the still picture holdings. Kelsey and I did a lot of data mining in preparation for this presentation. We went through series descriptions, finding aids, we talked to colleagues, some things we found on accident. So we found about approximately 50 different series that document CCC activities and camps. And among those 50 series, it's a representative of 15 different record groups. So 15 different records creators, we were able to find CCC-related photography. And part of why this is more difficult to get through, besides the number of places to look, is the fact that arrangement of the records varies from series to series. So a series might be organized by project number, and you need to have that project number to find images of the company or the person you're looking for. Whereas in other places it might be organized by Army Corps area or just by a subject, an arbitrary subject that was assigned to the photograph. So what you do need to know, what you should have before coming into still pictures, for your relative, if you're looking for a specific person, you want to know what company numbers, they could have multiple companies that they worked with or were assigned to, camps and project numbers, and locations, because sometimes in captions they only refer to the location and not the camp number, and vice versa. You also want to know what types of work was completed by the company itself. Again, some things are organized by subject, and that subject is really what type of work is being done in the image itself. And then lastly, the names of federal agencies as well as state agencies really helps you because it gives you an idea of what other record groups to look in. So before I get into Record Group 35, I want to cover 3 things. I want to cover Army Corps areas, company numbers, and camp numbers, because we'll see that those 3 pieces of information are really important to have prior to beginning your research. So Army Corps areas. Army Corps areas, The War Department managed the CCC administration, transportation, lodging, housing, all of the above. And so for logistical purposes, CCC camps were organized under Army Corps areas. And there were 9, or I believe still 9 Army Corps areas. So this is really a reference list or a reference slide for you. It's alphabetical by state and tells you what Army Corps area your state falls into. And these Army Corps areas are referenced throughout Record Group 35. So that's why it's important to have that information before you do your research. CCC company numbers. So company numbers are really useful and also very frustrating. There's a couple of things that you can get from looking at a company number. So each company contains the Army Corps area number that that company was formed in. So in the example here, I have California, which is the 9th Army Corps area. And we have 2 companies. Company 976. So if it's a 3-digit company number, the first digit will tell you what Army Corps area that company was formed in. If it is a 4-digit number, company 1913, for example, the second digit is what Army Corps area that company was formed in. What makes company numbers a little frustrating is the fact that a company number could change. So a company could be organized in California, and that number reflects that, and then they may have been moved, to example, to Georgia, which is in Army Corps Area 4. At times, they would change the numbers of the companies to reflect the new area that they're in, and sometimes they didn't. Sometimes they maintained that company number, and it wasn't consistent. So that makes it really frustrating. So you really want to track all company numbers if possible for the person that you are researching, and if there were any changes. But it does give you some clues. So if you saw that company 976 was working in Georgia, which is Army Corps Area 4, you would know from that 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 company was originally from California and originally formed in California. Company numbers also give you some other clues in terms of identifying what type of company it was. The CCC was segregated, and they put that into their company numbers. So if there is a letter affixed to the end of a company, it'll give you some clues. So C for African American companies, V for veterans, and X for mixed races. And they sometimes would combine those codes. So for example, I have company 2430-VC. That would have been an African American company that was comprised entirely of veterans, and likely World War I veterans. And just in the photograph on the side here, I want to point out that this says company 5418. If you notice, it's a 4-digit number. The second digit is 4, and on the front there, it's 4th Corps area. So all of that's lining up. The last thing I want to cover before getting into Record Group 35 is CCC camp numbers and locations. Now this is just a reference slide. It comes from the ccclegacy.org, which is a fantastic website. I highly suggest looking at it if you haven't already done so. But this gives you, the camp numbers give you an idea of which agencies sponsored the projects that were going on at that camp. So in this photograph here, we have Camp NP2. NP is National Park. So they were working on national park projects, and you would likely find, so this is from Record Group 35, this image here, but you would likely find Camp NP2 among the national park records for that time period. So this is a reference slide, so you can easily identify what type of work was being done at a camp or what agency was sponsoring it. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into Record Group 35. I do not have time to cover all of the series within Record Group 35. There are far too many, but there is a handout that is included with this presentation. That handout includes every single series within Record Group 35 held in the still picture branch. It includes the series titles, the locations that are found within those series, dates, and a brief description of what type of imagery is in there. It's not as comprehensive as it could be, which is why I included the National Archives identifier numbers and parentheses on that handout. You can go ahead and read in the catalog about those series descriptions. You just type in the, I believe, 6 to 8 digit number for that's in parentheses. So that is where I'm going to go with this. Let's go ahead and get into the records. So 35G, photographs taken by Wilfred J. Mead of CCC activities. Just a quick note about series identifiers within still pictures. In still pictures, we identify series or smaller bodies of photographs by the record group number, dash, and then an artificially assigned letter identifier. They don't really, some of them mean something, most of the time it's just a letter to fill in that spot. So 35G, photographs taken by Wilfred J. Mead. This is the largest series within record group 35. It documents CCC activities in camps throughout the United States as a whole. The photographs are assumed to have been taken by Mead himself. I noticed there are photographs from other photographers in there. The CCC collected photographs from the agencies that they were working with. The photographs themselves are organized alphabetically by subject, and the subject is the type of work that is being done in the photograph itself. So that makes this a little bit more difficult to go through, because if you're looking for a specific company or a specific camp, you really have to know what type of work they were doing. We have an alternate way to look, and I'll go into that in a moment, but know that the prints of these photographs themselves are organized by subject. We do have a card index in the research room. As I'll show you in a moment, though, it is not a complete index, but that index is organized by state. So if you know what state the camp was in, you can look under there as well, or the company that you're researching. So here are the finding aids. On the right there, 35G, that typed list is the box list. It is also the subject list. So if you just came in and you were looking for a company that did some fish and wildlife activities, you would hypothetically have to go through boxes 8 through 15 to narrow it down if that's the only information you had. But we do have, again, this card index in the research room. It is organized by state. I have 2 examples here. I used St. Thomas Virgin Islands, and on this, it tells you 10A. So that's indicating to me that I need to pull box 10 and look behind divider A. And if you look at the finding aid right there on the right, it says fish and wildlife. So I also want to point out, however, that also on this finding aid that is organized by subject, it does not list on the index card 37C. If you notice, 37C is the Virgin Islands, and this index card does not include that. So it is not a comprehensive index. It is a secondary index, and I would consult with both of them. The second example there, Camp F21 Washington, there are 2 boxes listed, 17A and 30B. For the purposes of this presentation, I only looked in 30B, but I want to note you don't see how many photos are behind there. So you don't know if you're looking for 1 photo of Camp F21 behind 30B or 10 photos behind 30B. So this is why we've listed this as an experience level research topic, is because it requires a lot of digging and it requires a lot of paying attention to captions and finding aids and indexes. So I went into the boxes. I went into the boxes for those index cards. So right on the left there, we have the Virgin Islands, and it's in 10A. What I found interesting about this photo is that 10A was marked as fish and wildlife, but this says road building in the caption. So even the subject lists aren't 100% accurate. But there was only 1 photo behind that divider for the Virgin Islands. In the second example, Camp F21 in Washington, I found 2 photos behind 30B. If you don't, you have to look. I had no idea how many photos I was looking for. Interesting enough, though, 30B was listed as road building, and it looks like they're building a bridge. So again, the subjects are arbitrary. Again, why this is a lot more tedious to go through than people often expect when they come into our research room. And this slide is just so you can see what the records look like. I cropped them in the previous slides, but you are working with photos on mount boards. The caption is taped to the front of the mount right there. In many cases, the caption has fallen off, so they've been affixed to the backs of the boards, so you have to look behind the board also. But this is what you'll be working with if you are to go through 35G. This is what the records look like. So the second series I want to cover is 35GC. 35GC is only 8 boxes, but that doesn't mean it's a small series. There's actually quite a few images in here, quite a lot, even though it's less than half the size of 35G. But there's a lot of loose prints in here, and there are various sizes, and I would estimate there's often 20 to 40 images in each folder. So with that said, the photographs in 35GC are organized according to an alphanumeric subject code. So really it's organized by subject and an arbitrary alphanumeric code that the CCC made. We didn't make this list. Even though the prints themselves are organized by these alphanumeric subject codes, in order to locate images within there, you have to refer to 1 or 2 indexes. So we have 2 indexes available, 35GCX and 35GCY. You have to request them in addition to 35GC. So I would suggest actually pulling these 2 indexes, going through them, and then deciding if it's worth your time to go through 35GC. There are some negatives for 35GC, but there's very few, and there's not a 1-for-1. But let's look at the indexes themselves. Oh, real quickly, this is really just for reference and the alphanumeric code. This alphanumeric code only applies to this body of records. As we'll see throughout this presentation, the CCC really liked codes, and they gave different bodies of records different codes, so really arbitrary. But in this example here, this photograph, say you had a photo ID number, and you were trying to find a copy of this image, or you saw it online, and you have this photo number, right there on the end, E2 indicates where this photo is filed. So you would make note of that, and you would pull the box that has E2, a folder for E2 in it. So here you can see miscellaneous camp kitchens. This photograph matches that. It is a camp kitchen. I also just want to point out that the CCC company number there, 1273, has number 2, and in there you see 35GC the Roman numeral 2, so those match up. So the second number indicates this was Army Corps Area 2, and the photo ID number is telling you that it was Army Corps Area 2. So here's the first index, 35GCX. It is a shelf list. It hypothetically should have been the most complete index for this series. However, most of this is missing. We did not receive all of the listings for every single alphanumeric code. We only have A1 through B23. So if you're interested in a subject that's A1 through B23, this is a great index to go through. It is an item level index. It tells you a brief description of the photograph, the company number or camp number, and then it gives you the photo number. Again, it's considered its own series, and it needs to be requested in addition to the photos. But if you were working with this, how would you get from this index to the photo? So I have an example here. This comes from Army Corps Area 4, but this was the shelf list for B1. So right there, B project, company 4472, and I was interested in image number IV-37-B1. So really, you would pull the folder that has B1 in it, and it's a folder full of loose prints, and you have to read through all of those captions and the handwritten numbers to find that photo. It is not in any particular order. It should be in an order, but through the years, people have just thrown these loose prints back in there, and you have to dig through it. So again, this is not as straightforward. You do have to read the captions and pay attention to what you're going through. I do want to note in this example for 37-B1, when I got to the image, there was additional information in the caption. It included Newberry, South Carolina. That information wasn't on the index itself, but it was on the photograph. So you do get additional information off of the captions and the backs of the prints. And I just have a second example right on the right. I used IV-40-B1. There was no additional information on the caption, but I did want to include an example of the back of the print where you can see the photo ID number that you have to look for. So to reiterate, you get your photo ID number, you pull the folder with that subject code, and then you go through the folder, try to find the image that is listed there. This is the second index, 35GCY. It is far more complete. I would say it is complete compared to GCX. This one is an itemized level list, but it's organized by Army Corps area, and that's where your Army Corps areas are coming into play. You need to know what Army Corps area your company that you're researching or the person you're researching was located. So you can go through these captions by the Army Corps area. I have 2 examples here. Army Corps areas 1 through 8 are typed. Army Corps Area 9 is handwritten. So if you are interested in Army Corps Area 9, you need to know how to read cursive. It is the same, it looks the same as the other index. It includes a description of the photo, the camp number, and a picture number. So, just like the other index, to get to the image that you want, you need to make note of that image ID number, and you're going to make note of what alphanumeric subject code it's indexed under, because that's how you get to the image itself. So here's an example. I have 2 images here, a class in placer mining, company 591, and it was photo IX-640-C8. I do want to note that here on the left is the image, and it has a very complete caption. It gives you a lot of information that's not included on the index. So just for information gathering purposes, you can get some information off these captions that you probably wouldn't find on the indexes or in the finding aids themselves. On the right there is the second example, IX-641-C8. Also, additional information on this caption. And again, I included a scan of the back of the print right there so you can see. Okay, so the third series I want to look at real quick is 35N, Photographs of African American Enrollees. I include this series, it's very small, it's only 2 boxes, but I include it to show that records are a reflection of the time period in which they were created and a reflection of the activities of an organization or an agency. So the CCC was segregated, and that is reflected in the records themselves, and I think that's really important to note when you're doing research on people that are considered minorities in this time period. When you're looking at, for African American enrollee, their records or their imagery is going to be separated from the general images themselves. Often, for example, like even in 35G, there are folders for African American enrollees that are separated out from the general photographs. And I wanted to use this series as an example of that. Records are a reflection of the time period in which they are created and a reflection of the agencies themselves. And I found this to be a really interesting photo. It has a story attached to it. It tells you about their social interactions. It talks about being in a glee club, and it's one of the few images I found with women in it and people identified by name. And I thought it was a very interesting, visually and in a narrative photograph. And just for reference, this series is organized by state. It's only 2 boxes. It's really easy to get through if you want to look through the whole thing. So the last 2 series I want to cover are examples of the various mediums that Record Group 35 photography exists. So for the most part, you're working with prints, you're working with really easy things to go through and flip through. But then we have some series, like this one, 35NC, photograph negatives of CCC activities in Army Corps areas. That are entirely negatives. We don't have prints for these, so you are working with a different type of medium that is a little more difficult to work with. So for this series, our negatives are stored in our cold vault, which means that you have to wait 2.5 hours from the time that you request it to review the photographs. They need to come up to room temperature, and that we estimate takes about 2.5 hours. So that's from the time you request it. Say you want it at 1 o'clock, you will not be able to see it until 3:30. These negatives are organized numerically by the Army Corps area that they were taken in, and they're under numerically by the agency assigned photo number. So we didn't assign the photo numbers were assigned by the Civilian Conservation Corps. There is an alphabetical code included in the photo ID number. I'm not certain why. It doesn't seem to be necessary to locating photos, but I do include it in here just as a note. So in this photograph here, A1 stood for aeronautics, and that's what's depicted in the image itself. And here's the alphabetical code. I, again, just use this as an example of the CCC having various organizational patterns, methods, and codes, which makes it a difficult record group to go through. So 35NCX is the shelf list to 35NC. It is an itemized list that is organized by Army Corps area. So again, you need to know what Army Corps area the company or the person that you're researching was located. I want to note that we do not have negatives in this series for Army Corps areas 2, 5, and 9, but we have caption list in NCX for 2, 5, and 9. So what that means is if you are interested in a company that was in Army Corps area 2, 5, or 9, you can read about the types of images that were taken, so you know a photo existed at some point, but it's not in this series. You will have to look elsewhere for it. But for the other Army Corps areas, you can easily get to the images themselves. So you pull, say you want Army Corps Area 1 or Army Corps Area 4, you can pull those lists, read through them, and identify if there's anything of interest to you. I will say that there are no captions attached to the negatives themselves, so this itemized list is the caption. You're not going to get any additional information from the photograph that you don't already see here on the itemized list. So getting from the list to the photograph. Again, it's organized by Army Corps area and they're under numerically. In this example, I used a clip from the Army Corps Area 4 and I identified IV-6-E. So I went to Army Corps Area 4 within the box and then I looked for the number 6. And then E is just the alphanumeric code or the alpha code that they use for the subject. Again, it's not actually necessary to locating things in this, other than it may have been organized differently in the past, but the way it came to us was by Army Corps area. So yeah, that is that for NCX. The last series I want to cover is 35K, Photographs of CCC Activities. Now I include this because it's a visually interesting series in that it is the only fully color series I could find in Record Group 35. To the best of my knowledge, I think it's the only color series for CCC activities that I could identify among the still picture holdings. It is narrow in scope. It only covers Idaho, Oregon, and Washington, but I think they are beautiful photos. You can request to see the 35mm reproduction slides. I want to note that there are 188 slides. We could only match 81 captions to those slides. So the remainder we have no captions for. But we have additional captions for images we could not find any slides for. So we'll get into that in a moment. But these photographs are also soon to have been taken by Wilfred Mead. He was the CCC photographer. So there are 2 indexes for 35K. 35KX pertains to images that are straight run of numbers. So in the example here, I use 35K-118. There are photo ID numbers that have letters with them. This list does not go to those numbers. It only goes to 35K straight run numbers. So here, these captions are extraordinarily long and give you a lot of information and do a lot of storytelling and put a narrative to these images. So even if you can't find the image in here, the captions themselves are really useful and I think are worthy of some review and time and transcription. But here I was interested in seeing 118, so I get into the 35mm slides and they were unorganized, so I put them back in order. You are welcome. You can easily find 118 now, and that's the slide there. So the captions aren't affixed to the images themselves. The captions are on these indexes. The second index is 35KY. This pertains to images that have a letter identifier as part of the photo ID number. So IOW, Idaho, Oregon, and Washington. So here I saw W20, and I went through there and I looked for W20 on there, and that was the image, so it matches up. I will say that's what a lot of this series is documenting CCC workers doing the actual projects. There's not very many posed or profiles or anything like that. It's really documenting the activities of the Civilian Conservation Corps. And this is for some reason called Victor's captions. I don't know who Victor is. I don't know if he was a photographer. I don't know if he assisted Mead, but this is referred to as Victor's captions, and the other one is referred to as Mead's captions. So to close out record group 35, before I ask Kelsey to come up here, I want to cover really quickly what you are not going to find in record group 35. You're not going to find a name or personality index. That's one of the reasons why we've marked this as a higher level experience before you do your research. You need to know who you're looking for in the photographs. You need to be able to identify them in the photograph. We can't do that for you. And most of the time, I would say 99.9% of the time, there is no person identified in the captions. Really, they just documented the activities in the camps themselves, not the individuals. So there are no individual portraits of enrollees within record group 35 that I could identify. We do have some group photos, I will say that, but I wouldn't say they're necessarily identified by name in the photographs. And you can review the handout that has the series descriptions for those group portraits. And we don't have files and information on CCC enrollees, but Kelsey, at the end of this presentation, will tell you how to get that information. And then again, to reiterate, most of the time people are not identified by names in the captions. So that is the end of record group 35, and I'm going to invite Kelsey up to cover outside of record group 35.
Hi, I'm Kelsey Noel, and I'm going to be talking about the photos and the series that you can look for CCC photos and still pictured ranch outside of record group 35, as Kaitlyn said, and we happen to have a whole lot of options. So as mentioned earlier in the presentation, the CCC worked with a lot of different agencies, and when they worked with different agencies, photographs of CCC activities and enrollees may have been taken and put into the records for the agency that they were working with. So that means that CCC material or imagery of CCC activities does show up in various different places in other agencies. So we had around 50 different series total, 15 different record groups, and I have included a list of some of the places that you can check some of the series that in their series descriptions at least mention the CCC. Many of them are CCC photos. Some of them may have CCC related material, but it really requires a researcher to go in and check for themselves to find out how much of the material is related to the CCC or even related to their specific research topic. So the photographs that you'll find outside of record group 35, they are usually related to the projects and the activities, the work that was done for the CCC. Sometimes you will find pictures of camps, camp life, activities, educational programs. It includes a lot of different very interesting imagery. Sometimes that imagery is dependent on the agency they worked with, and sometimes it's just what the agency decided to capture and retain. So I'm going to cover record group 95, series GP, which is available right now online. It's been digitized completely, and you can access it from wherever you have internet. So that's why I think it's and it's got a lot of CCC photos, so it's very important series to cover when you're talking about CCC photographic research. I'm also going to talk about record groups, series 8 DDR, 79 TR, and then 115C and 115CP. These are series that I found particularly interesting or noteworthy that I wanted to cover, but these are not digitized and available online. You will have to come into our research room to access these photographs. And then I have a list of my honorable mentions. So 83G, a 121 card index file, 119 CAL, and 210G. So those we'll get into at the end of the presentation very briefly. It's just an example. They're mostly to demonstrate how diverse your research is going to be, how many different interesting or potentially challenging things you're going to run into. So 95 GP. It is, like I said, fully digitized and available online in the National Archives catalog, but it is not a CCC series. It is a Forest Service series that has a lot of different subjects, and one of those subjects happens to be the CCC photographs. So in terms of the series overall, it has 61,111 images associated with 95GP. That is a lot of photos. So even though there are a lot of CCC photos within 95GP, the CCC actually makes up a relatively small portion of the series itself. So what this means is that browsing is not going to be your preferred method for discovery. So I've included a screenshot of the catalog on your right, and you can see there's a link where it says 61,111 images are described in the catalog. If you were to click on this link, you would get, over here on the left, I've included a screenshot of your results. So you would wind up, this would be your first page, and you'll see that it doesn't start off with CCC. It starts off with Foresters at Work General. There are over 3,000 pages of results. So if you are going to browse, and it's an amazing series, the photographs are definitely worth looking at. But if you're looking for something very specific, you would have to browse through up to, like, I think it's up to 3,056, I think, pages in order to find what you're looking for. So if you're looking for something specific, such as the CCC, browsing is not ideal. You'll also see here that there is a button for search within the series. You can click on that and try and search for use a search term or a keyword, but unfortunately, when 95GP was digitized, the captions were themselves, they were all digitized. The caption information was captured, but the captions were not transcribed. And the way the catalog searches would be, they would search what was the caption if it was transcribed. They cannot search an image for words. So I also don't recommend trying to search within 95GP for the CCC because you're not going to get results that are particularly usable. Instead, I'll show you how to search using what we would call a divider number. So the subjects within 95GP were all given essentially little numerical codes, divider numbers. And one of your handouts will be the divider numbers for the CCC photos in 95GP. So I've included a screenshot on the left, and I chose to look for California, and you'll see the screenshot shows there's a subject title, Civilian Conservation Corps, location, California, and then divider, which for California happens to be 351. And in the bottom of the screen, I've included a screen capture of what your search should look like when you are searching for Civilian Conservation Corps photos in 95GP by divider number. So what I wrote in the search bar was quotes open, 95-GP, quotes close, space, 351. And then I just did a basic search for that, and the catalog was able to search by the divider number, and we ended up with, on the right, you'll see the search results page, and you have successfully narrowed all of 95GP photos down to just Civilian Conservation Corps images in California. So one thing to note is that the subject codes, the divider numbers, sometimes there are multiple divider numbers for one location. So Colorado, you see 2 here. It's important to look in all of them. Don't just stop at one. You will have to look in for both. You'll have to do 2 different searches for each of the divider codes. So the photographs in 95GP, they're really cool photos. They're great photos. They depict enrollees. They depict camp life, the work that was done, projects, things like that. You can see they do have captions, and the captions may include the photographer and the date and things like that. But unfortunately, 95GP is not going to include a lot of people identified in the photos. The only times I saw that the people were identified other than photographer was if they were really, really important, like Herbert Hoover. For the most part, the people depicted in these photographs are not going to be identified in the captions. So next I'd like to talk about 8DDR. So 8DDR is a Department of Agriculture series, and the photographs were taken between 1935 and 1938. They mostly cover drainage projects, and it's arranged by subject, and within each subject it's then arranged by state, and then it's also within the state, it's arranged by drainage camp number. So this is another reason why it's very important to come in with as much background information as you can, because even outside of record group 35, things like camp numbers and projects numbers are going to be very important when you're searching for records related specifically to your relative. So the photographs tend to be fairly well captioned. They mostly cover things like project, I guess, workscapes. They mostly cover the work as it's happening, or the results of the work itself. There are a couple of images that do show enrollees actually at work, but you're not really going to find camps or camp life or things like that. You're also, unfortunately, even though the captions are pretty good, you're not going to find people identified by name. So it's a relatively small series, but in terms of CCC photos, it's actually not that unusual. There are 3 boxes of prints and 1 box of negatives. You're not going to find a one-for-one matchup. The prints have been assigned NARA item numbers, and then there is a folder list available in the Still Pictures research room, which I do recommend you start with when you come in to research. It's very important to note that a couple of the photographs in this series were taken by commercial photographers, and so some of the photographs are subject to copyright. The prints themselves are all black and white, and they're small, so they're about 3 by 5-ish. They kind of vary a little bit, but that's good because you think maybe 3 boxes isn't going to be a lot, but because they're so small, there's a lot of photos in those boxes. The next series I wanted to cover is 79TR. So 79TR is a Department of the Interior series. The photographs were taken between 1935 and 1941, and this series documents work that was conducted under the National Park Service. It is arranged by subject, and it covers activities that were conducted across the United States. And some of the photographs in this series have amazing captions. Unfortunately, not all of them do. The photographs I thought were most interesting, or that I chose to include in this presentation, did not have any captions, which is unfortunate. But the ones that do have captions, they're actually very good captions. What I found very interesting about this series, one of the reasons I wanted to include it in my little highlights, was that this series actually includes a lot of imagery related to Native American enrollees, Native American participants, and projects conducted at Native American facilities. Again, this is an example of records that were created, records that are a reflection of the time in which they were created. The Native American photographs were separated out and identified in their own folder. In terms of so it's just another example of how records reflect the time in which they were created. The series itself is about the same size as 8DDR. It's got 2 boxes of prints and 1 box of negatives. Again, you're not really don't expect a 1-for-1 matchup. The first box of prints has larger prints, about 8 by 10s, and the second box has smaller, maybe 4 by 5-inch prints, and they're all in black and white. The folder list in the research room is great because, this is the one that wasn't great. You can't narrow by location. It has subjects, I believe, but it doesn't indicate the location. So you're going to have to go in and look at the photographs specifically within each subject and look at all of the captions, and the captions that are, at least those that are, were created in order to find or hope to find what you're looking for. However, what is nice about this series is that they're all unrestricted, so there should not be any copyright restrictions. The next two series I'm going to talk about together, because 115C and 115CP, they are actually, these two series have exactly the same photographs. 115C, those are just mounted prints, and 115CP, those were in albums. We're not serving 115CP because of preservation concerns. However, you don't have to worry. If you request 115C, you will see all of the same photos because they're duplicates. These photographs are really, really well captioned. The captions include project number, date, location. They don't include people by name. Unfortunately, that's just a pretty consistent issue that you're going to see throughout your CCC research. A lot of the projects do include, depict the work and activities that the CCC did. It's 115C is a Department of Interior Bureau of Reclamation series, and the photographs were taken between 1934 and 1942. So a lot of their photographs are actually dams and reservoirs and irrigation projects. But I have included this photograph because it's a good example that mixed up in there, you're going to find some really interesting photographs as well, photographs of activities outside of their daily work. So this is a photograph showing enrollees in off-the-job training, and it's a foundry class. There is, one of the best things about this series is that it's really big. There are 37 boxes of prints. And so you have, that's one of the larger CCC series that you're going to find in Still Picture Branch. The prints were assigned agency project numbers and then item numbers as well. So you're going to want to come in with the project numbers that you're looking for. That's how you're going to be able to narrow down to the photographs you're most interested in. There is a box list available in the Still Picture Research Room, and fortunately the box list does include not only the project numbers but also the project names and almost always the location. So if you cannot find your project number, you can still try and narrow by location using the finding the box list that's available. As far as copyright goes, these are unrestricted photos, but again, I do have to mention that for preservation concerns, we don't pull the albums. The prints, though, those are great. And then we're going to get into my honorable mention series. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the 121 card index file. This is a index of CCC artists that worked with the records of Public Building Service. So I've got an example on the left side of the screen. You can see the 4 drawers that this card index file is housed in. The series is arranged alphabetically by artist last name. And on the right, you can see I've opened one of the drawers, and you can see how it's organized. In the center, I have pulled 4 cards just to show you what's on the cards. So you'll be able, when you pull these cards, you'll be able to find artist's name, the artistic medium. I believe some of these cards show oil or watercolor painting. You can see the subject that they painted. So there's one that says portrait. I believe there's one that says street in Richmond. And oftentimes you'll be able to find camp number as well, or things like that the artist was assigned to. But unfortunately, what you're not going to see on this card is a reference to an item number. So this card index file does not correlate. We don't have a series of artwork that correlates to this card index file. It's a really interesting series. It's a really great series for building context. So when you're doing genealogical research, what you're doing is you're building a story and you're building a narrative to really flesh out the experience that your relative or your ancestors lived. And this card index file helps with that. It helps with back research. So if you know that your relative painted pictures in the CCC for the building, the records of Public Building Service, you can come here and get an idea of what kind of work they may have done if they're included in this index. And it can help you trace back to project or camp number if they're included here and their camp number's on their card as well. You can help with that. But overall, it's going to be a really good series for developing your context and your narrative. You are free to pull the 121 series and look through them. It's possible that we have examples of the art in the other series, but unfortunately there's no way to go from this card index file to a piece of art. The next 3 series I'm going to talk about really briefly would be 883G, 210G, and 119CAL. So I'm going to talk about these series because in our research, we did not identify any of these series as including CCC imagery because the series descriptions and the finding aids that we looked at, they didn't mention CCC as a potential subject. However, you can see that there were CCC photographs in them. They were a very small portion of what was in those series. I think for 119CAL so far, there's only been 1 photograph identified as CCC in that series. But what happened is we're digitizing things all the time. And when we digitize things, usually, 95GP was an exception, usually we transcribe the captions. And when those captions are transcribed, those captions become searchable by the catalog. So all of a sudden, we can search CCC in the catalog, and we can get a return for photographs that are related to the CCC in series that don't have the CCC mentioned. This is one really cool. This is one of the biggest reasons why digitization is awesome. But it also is an indicator of just how experienced you should be as a researcher if you're going to try and get down into the really nitty-gritty, because if you know the agency that your relative worked with, you can pull other series within the record group that corresponds to that agency and do some browsing and do some looking. You may end up finding some photographs related to CCC work in those series, even if they don't mention it. And then I guess I want to move on to where else you can find CCC photos, because the still picture branch is not the only place, even within NARA, that you can find CCC photos. If you're especially if you're already gonna make out the trip to come see us, I would definitely schedule some time to go down and look at the Archives 2 textual records, because A2 textual records actually has a lot of CCC photos. Definitely worth the trip. I've also listed out a couple of the other locations within NARA that you can find CCC photographs. A lot of these sites, and we even have a presidential library in there. A lot of these sites have digitized their records, or at least some of their photographs, and so you can look in our catalog and find CCC photographs that aren't necessarily from Still Picture Branch that still relate to the CCC. So I definitely look there as well. And then we wanted to point you in the right direction for how to do your background research. So in 2015, Ashley Mattingly did a genealogy fair presentation called Civilian Conservation Corps Personnel Records. She did a very good job. It's very thorough. It's exactly what you need to go about requesting your personnel records or researching the personnel records for your relative or ancestor. That is definitely the place to start. Once you get that information, that's probably when you should start your photographic research, because until then you're going to have a bit of a rough time. National Archives is also not the only place that you can find CCC photographs. CCC photographs are pretty much everywhere. So Kaitlyn already mentioned the ccclegacy.org. I would look there. They have a lot of great research resources. But you can check other federal agencies as well. The National Park Service, the Smithsonian Institution, the Library of Congress. These institutions all have CCC photographs, and I do believe a lot of them are already online, and you can search in within those institutions for digitized photographs. I would check colleges and universities, especially if you know of a college or university that's nearby the location that is of interest for your research. I just did a quick Google search and I found these 4 universities that definitely have CCC photographic collections, and most of them, if not all of them, I believe have at least some of their photographs online. So that is a great resource. State repositories are also a good resource. Again, brief Google search, and I found three locations that have digital images. I would check out other states as well, because those institutions are going to have, probably going to have photographic collections that may be of interest to you. And then finally, I would check local repositories. Very unlikely that you're going to find digital collections in local repositories. They're mostly going to be physical collections that you have to go see. But especially if those repositories are nearby a project site or a campsite, they may have photographs that you would be interested in. And that concludes our presentation. If we have time, questions?
Thank you both so much. Whew. So we have a lot of questions queued up, and I apologize in advance already. We just don't have time. So I'm just going to get into one that was asked by several different people about how this was, how the camps were designated. So 2 people were asking, at least 2 people asked about mixed races. Does that mean that everyone that was not white or colored, or does it mean non-segregated?
From what I've gathered, I'm not 100% certain. It looks like non-segregated companies. So, and they weren't super consistent, so it can mean numerous things depending on who assigned the number to the company.
Right. And that was quick. So another quick question. Medics under camp project type or medical? Medics or medical?
Was that a reference to something that they saw?
I don't have anything further. So one quick last question then. Where are the camp annuals or yearbooks? Where are they located?
We don't have any in our collection. I'm not certain. I know that some companies or camps have historic associations, and they might be in possession of those yearbooks, but as far as still pictures goes, we don't have those. And I can only speak to what we have.
Thank you so much. So this has been a great talk, and there's a lot of interest. And again, I apologize if we didn't get to your question. Please submit it to their office at stillpics at nara.gov. Thank you, ladies, very much for this great presentation.